Thanks for tuning in and listening, folks. We very, very much appreciate it. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness on the other side of the glass of the control boards. Doing a fine job as always. The Liberals' election win on Monday should prompt some soul-searching by the National Conservative Party, says Tim Houston, the Premier of the province. He told reporters yesterday the election results indicate that the federal Conservatives are great at pushing people away and not so good at pulling people in. The Conservatives won just one of 11 seats here in the province. It took only 7 of Atlantic Canada's 32 seats in the vote, which returned the Liberals to power for a 4th consecutive mandate. Pundits say Poilievre's aggressive populist style of leadership was a tough sell here in Atlantic Canada, where traditional PCs, including Houston, largely shunned the Conservative leader who visited Nova Scotia only once during the entire campaign. So this is something that I'm going to ask you about when we open the phone lines. What do you think about this? Do you think that Tim Houston's right? Because I heard an interesting interview with Vashti Capellos yesterday and Andrew Scheer. And Andrew Scheer said, look, he said, we increased our seat count exponentially and we broke our record when it comes to popular vote for the Conservatives. So he disagrees with this analysis of Tim Houston. What are your thoughts on this? We talked about it extensively yesterday. And we will continue to unpackage all of this today. We will talk politics later on in the show, of course, with Don Desserud will join us, UPEI Political Science professor. Always enjoyed Don's perspective. He'll join us at about 12:15. Tomorrow, Tim Powers will join the show, and we will, again, continue to talk to as many candidates or winners as possible. And losers, for those who would like to rejoin the show. We reached out to Chris D'Entremont, who Vanessa tells me has declined an interview with us here on the show, which is disappointing. You would think that he would want to talk to as many people as he can, considering the fact that they're trying to rebuild here in Atlantic Canada. But anyway, nonetheless, we made the offer. So again, we'll open the phone lines in about an hour's time. Hope to hear from many of you and look forward to hearing all of your comments. Now, joining me here in studio is Shannon Miedema, the MP-elect for Halifax, the riding of Halifax. Shannon, congratulations. Nice win.
Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, and a pretty convincing win. Wasn't even close, right?
It was a pretty big win.
All right. What do you think happened? What do you think went right for you?
A lot of things went right. It was partly the election that we were in. It was having an amazing campaign manager and campaign team. It was putting in a lot of hard work. And I think also it was being a kind of a progressive Liberal, with this being a progressive riding that has traditionally been NDP or Liberal over the last many, many years. I think it's what people really wanted to see in terms of navigating what's happening south of the border. The threats to our economy and sovereignty are very real, and they were taking that very seriously in this election. Okay,
we use the term progressive quite a bit. How do you define progressive? I know that's a bit of a broad question, but what falls under that umbrella?
I mean, I guess the way I think about it is having values and priorities around environmental and social justice in part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
As well as also focusing on being fiscally responsible.
Okay. So do you feel as though that you're, when it comes to those things, do you align well with Mark Carney?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Liberal Party generally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similar values.
Well, you're known as an environmentalist. Would you say that Mark Carney would fit that category as well as an environmentalist, the Prime Minister-elect?
I think he definitely understands the importance of environment and climate action, and I was really thrilled when he was the UN Special Envoy for Climate Finance internationally. That was a serious job, which tells me that he takes it very seriously as well. Okay,
when it comes to pipeline development and these types of projects, does the Liberal Party have a policy on this, a broad or a kind of a blanket policy, or is it a bit fluid at this point?
Yeah, I don't think any decisions have been made. What's important is that we focus on our economic security and our energy security for all of Canada at this time, and make sure that we have, reliable and affordable energy across the country. I think here we have a really great opportunity focused on clean energy as part of that solution also, with our offshore wind resources, our onshore wind, our solar. We have a lot of potential here in Nova Scotia.
Okay, so the concept of development of pipeline to energy east, is this something what's your viewpoint on that?
I think it's too soon to know. I don't know what all research has been done. I don't know what the business case is for. I know the conversations that have been in the media are talking about the pipeline not even extending into Nova Scotia, that it would stop in New Brunswick,
right.
So I've kind of been following it, but I don't have any more detail than any of us do at this point.
Okay, when it comes to greening our technology, this is something that you've been a champion of in your previous work with the City of Halifax, of course. Is this something that you're going to continue to be on the forefront of?
Yeah, absolutely. I think climate and environment has to stay a priority. I think that if we consider it when we are coming up with solutions to all of the kind of hard things we're facing right now, it will serve us better in the long term, and is often a better solution over other options. So I don't think it's going to take a backseat at all.
Okay, what's it like to be in the situation? I've never been in your situation where you're elected as a member of parliament. I would think that it can be a bit daunting. Are you nervous? Kind of share what your feelings are right now.
Yeah, I think it would be a lie to say that there aren't nerves, but I'm overall just really excited. I'm excited to dig in, to learn, to represent every person who lives in Halifax, in Ottawa, whether they voted Liberal or not. It's a huge honor, really, at the end of the day, and I'm energized to work really hard and give it my best shot. I think it's going to be a great experience.
What are some of your priorities locally that you want to establish? I mean, we've got a housing crisis, we've got affordability issues, and obviously these things they involve the provincial government and the municipal government as well. But oftentimes the member of parliament can be a quarterback for all of this. So how would you describe your priorities for Halifax?
Yeah, so my priorities are my residents' priorities, and they're what I've heard for the last 2 months, which is, outside of Trump and the economy, it's cost of living, it's housing and affordable housing, it's healthcare, childcare, it's climate change. All of those things are really important. I think I have a really interesting past experience and skill set in being a bit of a quarterback, as you say, in having really positive relationships with all levels of government and all sectors to really drive good change. And I think, we have a great opportunity to bring a lot of federal investment into Halifax as we navigate, our relationship with Europe in terms of trade, our offshore wind resource, all these things, our building sector. I think we can really grow our economy here in some great ways.
Okay, and you obviously have a bit of a connection with the mayor of Halifax.
Yes, the mayor and the former mayor.
Yeah, that's right. So that I suppose would lend itself to him helping as much as he can and allowing that transition for you, and that's a good partnership, I suppose, is what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to have conversations with past politicians, current politicians, to do my research and understand what all of this is. And yeah, we're going to be needing to work really closely together to move things forward for Halifax across all three levels of government. So I'm looking forward to that very much. Okay.
When it comes to the government, it's a minority government, although it's pretty darn close to a majority government. I think 3 seats short or shy of that. So how workable is that in your opinion?
I think it's absolutely workable. The Liberal Party has a long track record of working as a minority government with other parties that are willing to serve in the best interest of Canadians and are very open to doing that more as we need to, as we have to navigate what's happening right now.
Okay. What are your thoughts on what Tim Houston had to say about, as I opened the show, I talked about it, that the Conservative Party of Canada needs to do some soul searching and perhaps did not cast a big enough tent. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think Poilievre has has been having very divisive politics for a long time. And I think that Canadians, in the way that they voted, kind of showed that they're not that interested in that type of conversation. They don't want to be told that they're broken. We really want to be driving forward together as a united country. And what I heard at some of the doors of long-standing Conservative voters was that they weren't going to vote for the party this time because of Poilievre. And so, that's all interesting information for the party to consider going forward.
Okay, the fact that they did increase their popular vote, and in years past it would have been enough to get the job done, but the collapse of the NDP was part of the story. Does that speak to anything when it comes to regionalization? This is an issue, is it not? Regionalization in Western Canada and alienation. Are any concerns or thoughts about that?
I mean, I really hope that we can keep having strong parties in Canada to have really strong democracy. Mm-hmm. And, I think the local NDP candidate ran a wonderful campaign, a strong campaign. It was really so much focus on the national scene and the risks right now from the United States. It really was quite an interesting election this time around.
Okay. When it comes to governing, will you represent your constituents first or party first, or do you think in those terms?
Yeah, you asked me this last time. Yeah. Constituents first, for sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
What if in fact that might not align for whatever reason with what's coming out of Ottawa or the PMO? Would you be willing to kind of buck the trend, if you will?
Yeah, I always want to speak bravely about what is happening in my riding and what people are telling me, and I would do that in Ottawa for sure. Mm. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the timeline? Any timeline as to when you'll be sworn in and all that stuff, and when Parliament will convene, and what's the timeline here? Yeah,
there's no date announced yet that I know of. Probably the end of the month, somewhere around there. But we have some orientation coming up in Ottawa over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I would think that when it comes to information, you could fall into information overload, right? You hear the fire hose analogy often used.
Oh, yeah. The fire hose analogy has been used a few times.
But it's probably quite applicable. But you can only learn, we'll take one step at a time, right? That's all you can do.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And I'm a fast learner, so I'm not worried.
Yeah, there you go. And what about building a team? Where are you with that?
Yeah, just in the process of having conversations with people that might be potentially interested in the team, both here in Halifax and in Ottawa. So just in the really early stages right now.
Yeah. Have you already had people reaching out to you with concerns? And do you have an email up and running and all that stuff?
Yeah, we still have the campaign email up and running. And so that's been going on for a couple of months and is continuing and still being managed. That'll all flip over once everything is kind of formalized. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, a lot of the talk about this election was, and you already alluded to the fact that the Trump factor and tariffs, and these are all still issues that we don't know where we're going to go, because Donald Trump is extremely volatile and unpredictable, although he had some nice things to say about your Mark Carney yesterday, the Prime Minister, of course, Prime Minister-elect. So what about concerns about the region and tariffs and our ability to deal with that, because this is still a huge challenge, and we don't know where it's going to go.
No, that's just it. And the uncertainty is really challenging, right? For businesses, for everyone, for employees. And I think that's why that's going to be, the major focus as soon as the swearing in happens, so we can get moving on figuring some of this stuff out. And I know Prime Minister Carney will be going to Washington shortly to start some of those conversations, and it's going to be top priority for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, congratulations, Shannon. Well deserved and well fought, and the results speak for themselves. So, again, congratulations, and don't be a stranger.
Thanks so much, Todd. Talk to you again.
All right, that's Shannon Mcneil, MP-elect for the riding of Halifax. We'll be right back. All right, the organization representing post-secondary students in the province is applauding the Nova Scotia government's new 2-year funding agreement for universities. Joining us to talk about this is G. Selesky, Executive Director of Students Nova Scotia. G, thanks for joining the show.
No problem, Todd. Thanks for having me.
All right, you got it. So tell us some of the details here, if you will.
Yeah, so in the new agreements that just came out, the kind of first initial change is that they're going to be 2 years long, which the last iteration was just a 1-year bilateral agreement, so spanning over 2 years. The biggest thing for students is that Nova Scotia residents who are choosing to study in post-secondary here in the province are going to face no increase in tuition in those 2 years. So there's a tuition freeze for domestic students from Nova Scotia, as well as a handful of other accountability measures and reporting measures to our universities, expansion around work-integrated learning opportunities for students to have more job-ready skills, and then finally some of the continued measures that we saw around student housing requirements from the past year.
All right, so that's all the good stuff there, but it's not all good news, right? There's still some real challenges and some real concerns here, are there not?
Yeah, of course. I think with some of those recommendations of ours that have been taken forward into these new agreements, there's also concerns. I think biggest one being that alongside the universities, we've been advocating for an increased amount of operational funding from the province into the universities, given the needs that they have financially for their operating costs, knowing that when there is a shortfall in funding and in revenue, that universities turn increasingly to students who already face the highest tuition rates anywhere in Canada, right here in Nova Scotia. So those fees and tuitions are really what we're worried about seeing go up when the universities aren't receiving enough funding, knowing that students are already the primary source of revenue for all 10 of our universities here in the province.
How about the government and its involvement in potentially in curriculum? This is something that the Houston government's talking about. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's challenging. And I think what we really need to ensure is that the folks that are going to be making policy decisions around what available programs there are in our institutions need to fully understand the scope of the environment of post-secondary in Nova Scotia. We have 10 universities, which is the highest number per capita anywhere in the country. And we attract students here to this province because there is such a profound depth to the different programs that we offer here in Nova Scotia. Students come for any range of things, whether it's they're looking at college, they're looking at a PhD, they're international students, and we need to continue to ensure that we can attract such a wide range of students here into the province. We know that over half of the students that attend school here are coming from either out of province or international to be able to complete their degree. And we need to continue to appeal to those students and provide, an education that really fills not just the labor shortages, but also continues to contribute to the diversity of the economy in what is, a small province that has such a robust university system.
All right, with tuition being the highest in the country, how do we maintain kind of that attractiveness?
Yeah, I think for Nova Scotian students, the tuition freeze is really that biggest piece because we've had the highest tuition for in-province students for at least a decade, and despite tuition caps, we really haven't seen any change or into the positive direction. So hopefully that decrease, that freeze will allow Nova Scotians to stay and study in the province. I think when we're looking at, out of province students, making sure that we're continuing to communicate the value of our post-secondary sector, putting our attention and funding into the universities that need it so that they're able to thrive is really important. The universities here in Nova Scotia provide so much to the economy and to the population of Nova Scotia in all of the different, regions that they exist in. It's not just Halifax. That's looking at, rural communities across our province. And we need to continue to ensure that they're seen as kind of that vital source of the growth and development of Nova Scotia.
What are your thoughts on international students and caps and all that's gone on with that?
I think it's unfortunate that we're seeing international students used as what's been said as policy scapegoats, I think, for a lot of the problems that are not just facing Nova Scotia, but are facing Canada. This is the same thing with this decrease in funding for post-secondary institutions. That's not just happening here in Nova Scotia. That's happening across Canada. It's happening globally in certain senses. So it's important that we're, again, understanding these issues fully. What is causing, the housing crisis? When does it date back to? What is causing the need for additional funding to our institutions? Taking a critical look at how we got here and what the solution is going to be. It's unfortunate that I think international students have been wrapped up into what has been a political debate, not just here, but on the national stage as well. And I hope to see, continued supports for these students that are contributing hugely to the province and also to Canada's economy by choosing to come and study here.
Okay, do you feel as though that when it comes to international students, so they've been exploited to some degree because of the increase in tuition, in some cases double, 2-3 times more universities have charged? Have universities exploited in some way? And I know that's a broad statement, but have they been exploited in some instances, in your opinion, in our region?
I think that the cost for international students is, of course, a concern when it changes year over year. There's currently no measures to predict year over year, if you're an international student, how much you're going to pay, which I think is a bigger problem in a lot of cases than the price tag itself, because international students are coming here and choosing to come and study in the country based on a bunch of values that they know that Nova Scotia or Canada will bring to them. I think predictability has been something we've really been trying to push. Before regulating the tuition costs there, we need to make sure that students know when they sign up for a 4-year degree that on their second year, their tuition cost isn't going to go up 30% and all of a sudden they can't afford to study in Nova Scotia anymore. So I think that certainly needs to change. I think, where we're getting into issues in terms of international students and attracting them, it's ensuring that there's the proper support systems, not just within a campus and not just within a university, but also within a community. Is there, enough housing? What does the community that they want to live in look like? Is that information honest? Where is it coming from? We've seen issues with recruitment, certainly, and third parties getting involved and perhaps not being as fully transparent as they could be when international students are coming to choose to study in a place where they've never been before. And so I think in those cases, we certainly enter into the waters of exploiting those international students. And there's a lot that we can continue to do to improve their supports and also be transparent about, where they're coming to study and where they're coming to live.
Okay, so overall, what are your feelings on post-secondary education moving forward over the next decade or so? Project out. Are you optimistic? Is there a reason for optimism? How would you describe your viewpoint?
Yeah, I think honestly, we're in need of a bit of a revolution, so to speak, in terms of the value of post-secondary. I personally think that we need to get back to understanding the essence of why we choose to go to higher education, the opportunities that it provides people, a community, a society overall. It's important, again, to fill labor shortages, to have research in specific areas. We want to be able to grow in the areas that we need. But I think we need to really come back to why do we want people to be better educated? How do we break down those barriers to allow people to be better educated if they're not coming from, upper class families? We need to ensure that everybody has access to, their highest potential. And once we get back to that way of thinking, I believe that there's going to be a shift. Where do I think it's going to happen? I'm not entirely sure. It's going to take some time. There's clearly some, let's say, more pressing issues on the minds of at least Canadians right now, but hopefully with some time and coming back to, what does Canada look like? What do we want it to look like? How are we going to pave that way forward? We're going to be able to revitalize the sector.
Okay, so how do we get back to that?
How do we get back to
what you described? Yeah.
It's going to require reshaping and I think a bit of innovation. It's going to require putting funding forward to our universities at the amount that they're, going to need. Does it mean filling every single gap? No. But it's going to look like providing funding for arts. It's going to look like putting more money into co-op and internship and apprenticeships for all programs, not just for STEM. I think it's going to mean, widening doors of access for students through student financial aid. There's a whole bunch of ways that we can really put importance and value back into the sector. And I think, part of that starts with funding and giving them, the amount of money that they need, but also ensuring that everybody who wants to be able to study has the opportunity to get there and to see themselves there.
G, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. G. Selesky, Executive Director, Students, Nova Scotia. Our province has updated its school code of conduct amid rise in school violence. Peter Day, President of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union, when we come back.
This is your before and after story. Prepare for an incredible career in nursing. At Southeastern College, experience expert hands-on training. Learn real-world skills in our professional lab and simulated settings. And train for opportunities as a practical nurse, registered nurse, or career advancement with our RN to BSN program. At Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sac.edu to get started.
All right, the provincial government released its updated code of conduct at a time when violence in schools has become all too common. The government says the code focuses on ensuring schools are safe for staff and students, with stronger definitions of unacceptable behavior and a requirement to support people affected or harmed by violence. Peter Day, president of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union, joins us to discuss this. Peter, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
All right, so tell us more about this code of conduct and why it's necessary in the first place.
Well, the code of conduct that was released, it's a responsible document, and it addresses some of the concerns that the NSTU has been bringing forward for the past number of years, and it's a much needed policy. If you look at the Auditor General's report from last June, the Auditor General called for some serious work to be done to address the safety in schools. Now, to be clear, this is one piece of the equation to help address that. The Auditor General also called for a province-wide strategy, and the Code of Conduct is just one part of that.
Okay, it updated the definition of unacceptable behavior. What can you unpackage what's included in that? What qualifies as unacceptable behavior?
Sure, and there's a whole list. And if you look at the document, there's a list of what's acceptable and what's unacceptable for students. What realistically, you have your bullying, your cyberbullying, your discriminatory behavior. All of those things are made very clear, and it clarifies the consequences for that unacceptable behavior, and that's an important point. What we really have to kind of focus in now is how is this going to be implemented? Because throughout the document, they talk about resources or supports that are going to be put in place. Well, what do those supports look like? Because right now, we have our school systems are stretched extremely thin. So if the government is actually sincere and really wants to see a positive change towards safer schools, then they're going to need to provide the appropriate resources for that.
Okay, so what do those resources look like?
When you look at human resources, right now our class sizes are far too large, and we need smaller class sizes. So teachers can connect with those students, build those relationships. Our classrooms have far more complex needs than they ever did. The other thing with that is our teacher specialists. We have school counselors, we have school psychologists, resource teachers, all who work with these students who have an immense amount of needs. They work with these students every day, but they're stretched so thin. They have caseloads that are they're struggling to meet. And that's the reality of our schools right now. If we're not able to meet the needs of these students, to give them the supports that they need so that they can be a positive member of the school community, then I don't think that we're going to be able to move forward with our safer schools.
Okay, when it comes to violence in schools, I don't know, security. What might be the proper deterrents to curb violence in schools?
Well, security. That's a Band-Aid for the symptom. If we're going to actually treat the problem and have our schools so that they are a safe environment for students to learn, for our staff to work, then we have to address that. And again, I'll talk about you have a smaller class size so that the students and teachers can have that relationship, so that the students feel like they're a valuable part of the school community, that their needs are being addressed. That's going to go a long way to addressing violence or inappropriate behaviors that are happening, because these things that are occurring, it's not just our high school that these happen in. It's not just a high school big news headline that we hear about. There's so many incidences that are happening from the elementary level all the way up to high school and right across the province. It's happening in all of our schools on a regular basis. And whether that's, extreme acts of violence or threats of violence, physical intimidation, or all of those things come into play. And at no point should anyone in the school community, whether that's a student, whether that's a teacher, or any other staff, a volunteer, they shouldn't have to worry about physical violence or the attempts of violence on their person.
Okay, are there any other jurisdictions that are doing this that have tackled this and have done a good job in this, or might be a model in order in which we can emulate or replicate?
Well, I think the code of conduct that we see that the government released, it's a solid document. It's going to come down to the implementation. If this is just going to be the same document that was put out 10 years ago without any of the supports put in place, then I don't really see it going anywhere. Now, again, if the government is serious and they're sincere and they want our schools to be safer, then we're going to have to see some investments to make sure that this happens. As far as other jurisdictions, I'm not sure of the level of success that they've had, but I can tell you this. The more teacher one-on-one time, or the more attention that our educators can bring to our students, the more supports that are there for our students, the safer our schools are going to be. We want a thorough plan. Again, this is one part of the puzzle, right? To see a province-wide strategy. Okay, what else are we going to do to address these inappropriate behaviors, these instances of violence? This document, again, face value, very positive, but what is it going to look like when it's implemented? Because, there's cutthroat where they talk about supports being offered. There's going to be professional development offered to teachers and staff. If this is going to be a 30-minute tag on to a staff meeting, then that's not sincere. That's not real professional development. You have to give it the time and the attention that it deserves if we want to see some meaningful change in a positive direction.
Okay, you talk about root causes and for violence, but the reality is that oftentimes it goes beyond the classroom, and these are societal challenges, socioeconomic, whatever it might be. So it's quite a broad, complex issue, obviously here, right?
Oh, absolutely, and you're bang on. This is a societal issue, but our society centers around our schools. Our students spend the vast majority of their time in a school setting, and so those issues that happen outside of school are ultimately going to come into the school setting. And this is something that teachers have dealt with, for as long as there's been a school system, and it's part of our culture. It's part of how we work. So we have to ensure that those supports are there in our schools in order to meet the needs of our students. Students live far more complex lives now. I went to school in the 80s, and we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have social media. And I'm not saying that school was easy, but I think there was a whole lot less pressures happening to our students. And we have to take that into account and be realistic when we look at things. There's so many outside influences, and this can be overwhelming for many of our students. So again, I'll go back to the supports that are needed. We have our school counselors, right? They're overwhelmed with dealing with the mental health issues, trying to meet the needs of the students that they have within their school, and they're struggling day to day to meet those needs. Our school psychologists, our resource teachers, even our classroom teachers are playing the part of many other roles than just teaching, reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Okay, Peter, I appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this. We'll talk again.
Thank you so much, Todd.
All right, take care. Peter Day, President of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union. The Public Service Alliance of Canada calling on the newly elected Prime Minister and the Liberal government to commit to investing in Canada's public services. That when we come back. All right, the Public Service Alliance of Canada calls on Mark Carney and the new Liberal government to commit to investing in Canada's public services and the workers who deliver the support millions rely on every day. Joining us to talk about all of this is Chris DeLiberator, Regional Executive Vice President, Public Service Alliance of Canada Atlantic. Chris, thanks for joining the show.
Happy to be here, Todd.
All right. So, what are your thoughts? I guess first off, is PSAC partisan?
No, we are a nonpartisan union. We promote to our members that they look at the platforms of the parties and consider voting for those candidates that are worker friendly, that have workers' best interests in mind when they're going to the ballot box.
Okay, so that said, what are your thoughts on the election result?
Well, we're optimistic, hearing what Mr. Carney has to say coming out of the election, that he's willing to work with us. Those are some things that, within their platform. Now, that he did say that he's going to cap the public service, but we don't really know what that means or what that looks like right now. So, we are looking forward to hearing what those plans are and how it looks, because right now, as we've said, Canada's public service, that was an election issue during this past election, and workers and families rely on the services that our members and public service workers deliver. We're clear that livelihoods are on the line because of the threats of the reckless tariffs from our neighbors to the south. And we're, at this time where we're dealing with an affordability crisis, elected officials need to realize that it's not the time to cut public services. So what those caps means and where that cap lands is going to be very important for us, and how we do look to work with this government moving forward on some of these issues.
All right. Are there any collective bargaining agreements in play here? Is everything pretty much shored up, at least in the short term?
Actually, our Treasury Board bargaining units, their collective agreements are coming up to expire within the next couple of months. So the 4 Treasury Board tables are operational services, program administration services, library services, and technical services. Those folks are going to be starting negotiations this year. So some of those contracts expire as early as the beginning of June.
Okay, so when it comes to about a year ago now, there was talk about a summer of discontent, and are there some of those issues that they've been resolved, or where are we with those issues?
No, those issues still remain. That summer of discontent that you refer to with respect to some statements made by the previous national president, Chris Aylward, surrounding remote work, and that's still an issue for our members. A significant portion of our members. I mean, we do have a number that have to go into work every day, but for those folks, and we've said this in the past, for those folks where it does make sense to allow those people the flexibility to work remotely. We believe that it's beneficial to productivity, and studies have shown that it's beneficial to productivity, but also that it can help the government with their savings, because if you don't need that full amount of office space, and the government did say that, in previous budgets, they're looking to offload a number of leased and government-owned buildings that could have, I believe they booked $3 billion of savings as a result of doing that. But with having folks working, in the office, they still need that space, so that those savings kind of evaporated as a result of those decisions.
All right, so that's still an issue then, or no?
It is still an issue, yes.
Okay, so what's next, or is there negotiations ongoing with it, or what's the next steps?
Well, we haven't started bargaining yet. We've only just issued our notice to bargain with those tables. And we're still putting together our full package of proposals to share with the employer and receive their proposals as well. So at this point in time, there's no plans to meet yet, because again, we're just in the very early stages of beginning bargaining.
Okay, the public sector grew exponentially under the Trudeau watch, and do you feel as though that perhaps there might be a need to make some adjustments, and hence the what Carney's talked about concerning freezing the public sector staffing levels? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when we look at that, cuts at this time are just not a feasible thing. We really need to look at what's happening. Again, our economy is in crisis right now with the threats of the tariffs that are being imposed. So now is the time to invest in public services. We're going to have more folks that are relying on these public services to help get them through this financial situation. Many of our members deliver the services that folks rely on in those times. So capping the workforce will weaken the ability to respond to that affordability crisis. Public service workers, they're out here right now. They're keeping our border safe. They're responding to natural disasters. In this part of the country, they're on standby pretty much 24/7 for search and rescue operations, which is really important right now in Nova Scotia, obviously, with the lobster fishery in Southwest Nova ramping back up for after a period where they typically slow down a little bit through this particular season in Southwest Nova. It's our members that are there for these folks. So if we start reducing the labor force, the public service, those services could be at risk of being there when needed.
Chris, in fairness, so would there ever be a time in which you would agree that cuts would be appropriate?
Personally, no. I can only speak for myself, and I don't believe that we're here for our members, and we're going to do everything we can to protect our members. They do a lot of work, great work for this country, and as the population continues to grow, more workers are needed to help deliver those programs and services that new Canadians and existing Canadians rely on, as I've mentioned again, and it's so much more than the couple that I've just mentioned. I mean, we talk about food security and food safety, and you don't have to look too far back in history to see what happens when a government, be it federal or provincial, reduces workforce in relation to safety. I mean, just look at what happened with Walkerton and the issues with the water supply there when cuts were made to public services. The amount of testing went down, and we had the horrible E. coli situation that came up there.
Okay, any concerns about AI and its impact potentially on the Peace Act membership?
We've been very clear that AI, we understand it's here, we understand it's going to be used, but it should be a tool to assist our members, not to replace them. And that's been the stance that we have had on this. If it assists our members in completing the work that they need to do in serving Canadians, wonderful. But if the intent is to actually replace our members, then that's a short-sighted approach to the use of AI.
Well, I guess you say it's short-sighted, but as AI develops and its capabilities evolve, might that change in the future? No. And additionally, AI, we look at it every day, but it's one of the most,
ironically, it's not an environmentally friendly option. With the amount of power and water it actually uses to operate these server farms that AI function from, it's going to do damage to the ability of governments around the world to meet their targets for climate reduction.
Okay, so do you think that the government's listening when it comes to AI, or do you feel as though that they're forging ahead and want to expand AI?
They certainly want to forge ahead and expand it, and we will continue to voice our concerns with respect to it as it goes forward.
Okay, so I guess overall, how do you feel the state of Peace Act is right now? Do you feel as though the union's in a good position when it comes to bargaining, and what are your thoughts in general, I guess, moving forward?
I think we're in a very good position, but time will tell. I mean, typically we have decent relationships with government. We just hope that at times they will honor the promises that they've made to actually consult and negotiate with us, which doesn't often happen. And I would like to see a different approach from government when it comes to the matters that are important to our members and to workers.
Okay, Chris, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Chris DeLibertore, Regional Executive Vice President, PSAC Atlantic. What are your thoughts? What's on your mind today? We've got an open hour. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. I'm sure that some of you still have some things to say about the federal election, which is in the rearview mirror now, but lots of analysis going on and postmortems going on, including from the premier of this province, Tim Houston, who suggests that it's time for some soul searching for the National Conservative Party and admits that there's been a pretty broken relationship. As a matter of fact, he said he has no relationship with Pierre Poilievre. So what are your thoughts on what the conservative or progressive conservative premier has to say about all of this, or anything else you get in your mind? The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. What is on your mind today? The Liberals' election win on Monday should prompt some soul-searching by the National Conservative Party, according to Tim Houston, the premier, of course, here in Nova Scotia. He says the election results indicate the federal Conservatives are great at pushing people away, not so good at pulling people in. Do you agree with that? Or do you disagree with that? Look, Andrew Scheer, who is cagey a politician as they come, last night in an interview with Vassy Kapellos, said that he completely supports Pierre Poilievre and says that they grew the seat count by quite a bit, and the popular vote was grown to record levels. And it says if not for the collapse of the NDP, we'd be having a different story told right now. And look, there's some truth to that. If the NDP held on to most of their seats, you would think that they would probably have come at the sacrifice of the Liberals, and perhaps we have a different story. But we talked about this yesterday, and I threw the phone lines open yesterday and asked you the question, what do you think about this, and what are your thoughts on all of this? And I'll do so again today. And first off, do you agree with Premier Tim Houston? Do you think that the federal Conservative Party needs to do some soul searching? Or do you think that they are pretty close to getting the job done and just need to double down and get Poilievre into Parliament and get a seat and go at it again and topple the government, the minority government? I think that that's probably a tough sell considering how close the Liberals are to a majority. And I don't think that they'll have too many problems convincing some NDP MPs or perhaps even some members of the bloc or maybe even some Conservative MPs to vote in favor to get to so they can continue to govern. Pretty darn close to the majority status. And you can be rest assured they're working the phone lines trying to convince some people to cross the floor already. I can guarantee you that's going on. So what are your thoughts on all of this, folks? 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with Tim. Hello, Tim.
Morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Very good. Well, listen, I thought it was extremely telling to hear the Premier of Ontario and Mr. Houston, how they spoke and about the Conservative Party. It'd be interesting to say what they say privately versus what they said publicly, but what they said publicly was certainly very telling. At the end of the day, Mr. Scheer can say what he wants, but they failed. That's a fact. And, you know, it's interesting because the Conservative Party, looking at the demographic of Canada, you can see where their strengths and weaknesses are. And the fact of the matter is they have more weaknesses than they have strengths, and that rests solely on the leader. He wasn't willing to adjust. He wasn't willing to pivot, and that cost him considerably. I mean, there's a gentleman that had, you know, a 20-point lead weeks ago, and for whatever reason, decided to do things the way he wanted to do it, and that didn't work out. And again, that rests solely on him.
Well, the reasons why, I mean, Justin Trudeau no longer being on the political scene, that was a huge factor. I think you'd agree with that. And the Donald Trump factor and his threat to sovereignty, that played a huge role. Do you not agree?
Well, here's what I'll say. The Conservative Party, they were really the author of their own demise. They wanted to go after Mr. Trudeau. They went after him. And finally, at some point, and maybe Ms. Freeland had something to do with it. He decided to say enough's enough, and then walked away. When he walked away, he took the carbon tax with him, and all of a sudden, the messaging, the money that they spent for 16, 18 months went out the door, and the Conservative Party was left with very little to say for a period of weeks, and they weren't able to pivot on time. And that's reflective on the executive of the Conservative Party and Mr. Poilievre. And the fact of the matter is in politics, you're in it to win. You're not in it to play second or third. And at the end of the day, it may be 6, 8, maybe longer months before we see Mr. Poilievre back in the House in Ottawa, if in fact he ever comes back.
Do you think he'll come back? What are your thoughts on that? What do you think, Tim?
I think his ego can't allow him to step away. Somebody will give up their seat, but again, it's at the Prime Minister's discretion when he calls the by-election. Should somebody step down? But again, it'll be 6, 8 months. A lot changes in that period of time. And can he be effective outside the House? Certainly not as effective as he can be in the House. At the end of the day, that's for him to decide now, and others. That's not my decision.
So you think Tim Houston's on to something when he says the National Party needs to do some soul searching? You agree with that?
100%. It wasn't just Mr. Houston. It was Ford. And it's I can't remember the last time after a federal election that I heard two premiers talk the way they did about their leader. And, you could tell they want to say more, but they hesitated and, refrained from doing that. But what they said, both of them, was extremely telling.
Okay, Tim, appreciate the call. Take care.
Thanks.
902-405-6000. Look, there's a pretty big difference, in my opinion, between the Progressive Conservative Party of Nova Scotia and the Conservative Party of Canada, and I think that's what Tim Houston's getting at. And he's made it no secret in the past that he wants to delineate himself and detach himself from the Conservative Party because of he can see the writing on the wall, right? He can see it's pretty evident that Pierre Poilievre's approach did not resonate here in Atlantic Canada. He only came here once, I think it was, during the entire campaign into that last minute Trenton rally, which was well attended, lots of people out to it. But I think that when it comes to Tim Houston and Doug Ford, they are doing their best to keep as much distance from themselves and Poilievre and the federal government and the federal Conservatives as possible. 902-405-6000. What is on your mind today? Let's talk to Mark. Hello, Mark.
Oh, hello. Thanks for taking my call. So first of all, I disagree completely with your last caller. Pierre Poilievre, found himself in just a disastrous situation when Trudeau resigned and then when Trump put the tariffs in. The fact that he lost his own seat is just because the Liberals pumped in millions and millions and millions of dollars. And you know what? Good for them. Okay. I am a card-carrying conservative. I fully support Poilievre right now. These results, they're not surprising to me. I want to do a little bragging. So I had Liberal 165, Conservative 145, BQ 26, NDP 6, Green 2. And that right now it's 169, 144, 22, 71. So, this minority situation I think is good for Canada. I kept telling people, even though I'm a conservative, I just hope that neither party gets a majority. And I don't believe that the Liberals will be able to flip. They need three more seats. I don't think they will be able to do that.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that? That's not very many seats. That's only 3 seats.
It's not very many. But who are they? Who are they going to flip? They're going to get 3 conservatives to go over. They're going to get 3 maybe NDP.
They could get easily 3 NDP members. I could see it happening.
No, they could. I'm just thinking it. I just don't think it will happen. They could. Anything can happen, as we've seen. Pierre Poilievre had led for years by double digits in the polls. Okay, yeah. This election was determined primarily by Donald Trump and his terrorists. Now, that's not to say that Mark Carney and his team didn't run a good campaign, but as for Tim Houston, as far as I'm concerned, Tim Houston has been gunning for that top federal job ever since he won the last provincial election. And if you listen to his comments that were played on your station, you know, I'm focusing on Nova Scotia. And then one of the reporters, like, I don't know who it was, said, so is that a no means no? And he just says, I'm focusing on Nova Scotia. Tim Houston and Doug.
But in fairness, sorry to interrupt you, Mark, but that's a typical politician's answer, right? I mean,
it is typical. It is.
Yeah,
it's typical. But I think what he's not saying is telling. So this is just what I think. The progressive conservatives in this province. I mean, listen, they are more liberal than our last liberal governments under like Mcneil, okay, and Rankin. So, you know, it's in name only. It's like the BC Liberal Party, the old party. You know, they have about as much to do with the federal Liberals as, you know, the PCs in Ontario have with the Conservative Party of Canada, in my opinion. So I think Poilievre, sure, could have maybe, you know, done a little bit better in Nova Scotia, but I mean, it's just not in there. He's got to focus on where to pick up the seats. And, you know, the collapse of the NDP and the collapse of the Bloc, you know, really, you know, turned him in. And I'll say one more thing. You know, the worst thing that the NDP ever did was sign that stupid agreement, supply, whatever they call it. Yeah. And I knew from then they were done. They were done. And it's telling, you know, they made a strategic choice and it failed. And I'll just say one more thing. Okay. People should look up Poilievre. And when he was attacking, I mean, it sounds like ancient history now. Remember SNC Lavalin?
Yeah, I sure do. Yeah.
And a lot of Canadians don't. And Poilievre was their attack dog on that one. And I fully support Poilievre. If he wants to step down, fine. Then I think Doug Ford would be the natural choice for the next leader. Okay, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. What is on your mind today? What are your thoughts? Do you agree with what you've heard? Perhaps you disagree with some of the things you heard today. Give us a call, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Before we go back to the phones, I'll read an email from Jamie. Jamie says, I don't believe for one moment that the Conservatives failed to attract people, and they definitely didn't push more people away than they attracted. They gained in the popular vote, so clearly that's not accurate. The Liberals can also be accused of pushing away voters. About 56% of Canadians didn't vote for them because where is Houston's concerned about how the Liberals aren't reaching people. Furthermore, based on Tim Houston's spending, I have a hard time calling him a Conservative anyway. The email goes on to say Canada is a majority left of centre party. And as soon as Trudeau was gone and Trump started attacking Canada, the Liberals had a massive advantage. The vote on the left coalesced around Carney, and that's why they won. When all the left-leaning people in Canada line up behind one party, the Conservatives will always have a very hard time. This nonsense about how Pierre failed is frustrating to me, and I'm not a hardcore supporter. I'm about as centre as you can get, but I'm sick of all this spending and increased debt. Comes from Jamie. 902-405-6000. And look, there's some truth to what you say there. In that, if the NDP were strong and didn't collapse in the way that, total utter collapse, and the Bloc, we may be talking about a different story here today, and probably would be, actually. But the reality is that one of the challenges when it comes to governing or trying to get elected in a country the size of Canada is you've got vast regionalized regions. You have vast regions which different needs and different societies in a lot of different ways, and a different approach is needed. And how do you appeal broadly across the entire country to get the support that you need to win? And in that, if you're Pierre Poilievre and your tone is not as sharp, then do you maintain your support that you did gain? So it's very difficult to his point, to Jamie's point. If you're the only center-right party, basically is what the Conservatives are, and you've got the left, center-left with the NDP and the Liberals, and of course, as mentioned, the Bloc and their role in Quebec. So it creates a real challenge. Valid points. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. And by the way, we've got a hockey game tonight if you want to talk about hockey. And the Toronto Maple Leafs, do the Leafs get it done against Ottawa in Game 6? I certainly hope so.
but I have my doubts because I'm a long-suffering Leaf fan. Eric, you want to talk about hockey, so I'll give you the opportunity. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think they'll win tonight because a couple of weeks ago, when I had a chance to speak to your counterpart there in the afternoon, I projected that Washington would take them out, the Canadians, in 5, and I projected that Toronto would take out Ottawa in 6. But the overall synopsis is that it's going to be tough in Ottawa because Ottawa's got nothing to lose. They fought hard to get into the playoffs, and I think that nobody wants to go to Game 7. So I think Toronto will throw everything at them but the kitchen sink. So I mean that's the way I see it. Anyway, sorry for the way I'm talking. I got bronchitis, so you have to bear with me.
So you're predicting a Leaf win, is what you're telling me?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, they don't want to go to Game 7, right?
Well, of course they don't want to go to Game 7. They didn't want to go to Game 6, and they didn't want to go to Game 5. So what you want doesn't really always translate into how you play.
Well, that's true too. Yeah. And as far as the guy that is the new Prime Minister, if he was a Mark Trudeau, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So that's the overall evaluation of that particular one. And I agree with you. I think the NDP have nothing to lose, and I think they're going to cross the floor and make Carney a majority government. I don't know how you feel about that.
Eric, I think it's a real possibility that they could convince 3 of them to do so. I don't think that's beyond the pale. So anyway, Eric, thanks for the call, pal. Get well.
Thank you.
902-405-6000. James, hello.
Hi. Just a quick comment on the issue of Mr. Poilievre not having a seat and what might happen. Would one of his members resign in order for him to be able to run in that constituency? We just went through this process in Halifax. Andy Fillmore resigned on September 2nd. The Canada Elections Act of last year, the Canada Elections Act gives the Prime Minister 6 months to call the by-election, which is what happened. The by-election in Halifax was called on March 2nd, 6 months after September 2nd. And then the Canada Elections Act said the campaign can be up to, I think it's 55 days. I don't have it in front of me. Anyway, the by-election in Halifax got superseded by the general election. All of this to say, if a Conservative member resigns and Poilievre gets the nomination, the Prime Minister has 6 months to call the by-election where Poilievre wants to run. Mm-hmm. He could call it sooner. Carney could call it sooner. And that will be a very interesting political calculation and debate. The Carney could call it the day after Poilievre gets a nomination in a newly vacated seat, or he could wait up to 6 months.
Why would he though? Why wouldn't he wait? If I'm Mark Carney, I would wait till the last minute.
Oh, I'm just wanted to point out the facts. I mean, but he'll obviously get severely criticized if he waits by Conservatives.
Well, he doesn't care about that. That doesn't.
Well,
right.
I actually am not sure about that, and I don't have an opinion. But I mean, I don't disrespect your opinion. No. Obviously, one option is to wait 6 months and keep Poilievre out of the House and weaken the Conservatives, shall we say, as the Liberals try to get through some stuff. They've got a lot of stuff they've promised to do. Anyway, it'll be interesting. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that the Prime Minister has up to 6 months. That's a long time.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I did know that, and it's a good point, James. I still think that Mark Carney would wait till the very last second before he'd call it, and why not? Because make Pierre Poilievre stay out of the chamber, I think that's advantageous to the Liberals.
I don't necessarily disagree. Anyway,
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. 902-405-6000. Again, I would be shocked if, in fact, Mark Carney would call the election before that 6 month expiry date, because he doesn't want Poilievre on the floor. And you could call that dirty tactics or whatever it is, but you can be rest assured that that would be the opposite if they were the Conservatives. They would employ the same tactic, guaranteed. Poilievre is in tough either way, folks. It's got to be tough for him right now. Not that I'm calling for any empathy or sympathy for Pierre Poilievre, because I'm certainly not. But you can be rest assured that After being in Parliament for 20 years and being that guy and having that presence, it's got to be an ego bruise at the very least for Poilievre. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us again, 902-405-6000. Paul, hello.
Hello, Todd.
Hi there. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to air my opinion.
Sure.
I just want to quickly say that I want to also congratulate Pierre Poilievre for, conceding defeat. During this election, some of the propaganda was that he was likened to be like Trump, and we could see that he is different from Trump because when Trump lost his election, he caused chaos in the United States. But Poilievre, because he didn't do that in Canada, we are having a smooth transition. He didn't say the election were rigged or stuff that would somebody like Trump would have said, and I want to congratulate him for that. I'm a liberal. I'm also happy that the liberal won this election, but I also want to appreciate Poilievre for making Canada politics peaceful at this particular moment that we are going through this tariff war with the United States. And also want to say that Poilievre did not lose because of his style of politics. One thing we all have to know is that somebody has to win. Somebody will have to lose, and somebody must win this election. So if McConnell has lost this election, we would have also come up with excuses why he lost the election. Just like during the United States election, what's her name again?
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, who contested with against Donald Trump, was having all the ratings through the media, all the hypes. It was all like it was going for her in her favor. But at the end of the day, we saw that the people voted for Trump overwhelmingly, and we're all surprised that Trump won that election. And at the end of the day, people came up with excuses why what she did wrong, what she said wrong, and all those stuff. So, and I also want to say that sometimes a lot of people vote based on emotion. If you see at the beginning of things when Trudeau was Prime Minister Trudeau, former Prime Minister was still in the office, it was as if Poilievre was having a higher hand over him at that point. But as soon as McConnell was brought into the picture, things began to go down for the Conservatives. So I believe a lot of emotion plays out during politics. Sometimes it's not maybe because of the personality of the candidate, but just the kind of person that the people really want. That's the things that kind of play out at the end of the day. So this is my own opinion. I just want people to give Poilievre a break. I believe he did well, and I wish him well in his.
Well, Paul, look, I understand what you're saying, and it's a relief that he was accepting in the results, and I get that, but he lost his seat, and he didn't get the job done when all is said and done. It's I get it that the Conservatives have some victories here. They grew their seat count. They grew their popular vote to record numbers. But they didn't get it done, and he lost his seat. And to me, that is not a good scenario. Anyway, you try and crack it up.
Yeah, I agree with you, Todd.
Okay. All right, Paul.
All
Thanks
right,
for the call, pal. All right, take care. 902-405-6000. One thing that I will say, folks, and I'll talk to Don Desserud about this, is in Poilievre's writing this ballot, this unbelievable ballot, which was, I don't know how many names were on it, but it was this huge long list of candidates, and to me that was I think a form of interference, I would have to say. Now, did they break any rules by stacking that ballot? No, they didn't break any rules technically, but it was pretty evident that it was targeted, and then that writing was targeted, and it certainly didn't help Poilievre. That said, he lost by quite a bit, so it wasn't close. But anyway, that's something that I'll talk to Don Desserud about. 902-405-6000. Kevin, hello.
Hello, Todd, you old married man.
Yes, sir. As opposed to just an old man, now I'm an old married man.
Yeah, that's right. You got a better title there.
That's right.
Anyway, just my view on Polyev. I think he did really well. I think he's going to be around for a while because I think he does his job as a bulldog very well, and I know because I got 2 bulldogs.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he does. But the challenge is, Kevin. It's. Imagine if you're Pierre Poilievre and you no longer have a swipe card to get into Parliament. It's pretty hard to be the bulldog from outside of the chamber. That's one of the challenges that he's dealing with. I think you'd agree with that.
They don't want him in there for that reason, because I think basically what Canada is now, you draw it in half with a ruler. You've got the people that are basically awake and the ones that aren't, and you've got the scenario like in the States. You've got the whole country divided in half, and it was done purposely by Trudeau. That he worked on this for a lot of years, and I think we've jumped from the frying pan right into the fire with Carney, because he's one of these net zero guys. And I think the net zero guy is going to meet the drill baby drill guy, and I don't think that's going to go over too well.
Well, look, if yesterday's comments were any indication from Trump, he seemed to warm up to Carney at the very least. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Yeah, and then the other thing, Kevin, of course, is that can change in 2 seconds anyway, right? So
that's his game, Todd.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. You're right. You're right.
People figured it out.
Yeah. And also, Kevin, of course, like I just said, that can change in 2 seconds anyway. So,
well, hold your pants.
All right, Kevin. Thanks for the call, pal.
Yeah.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Look, that's the thing with Donald Trump is that, yeah, he swooned a bit over Mark Carney yesterday. Called him a gentleman, whatever. That could change in 5 seconds. Kevin, hello.
Good morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
I hear you talking about the Leafs this morning.
Yeah.
I was a Leaf fan in 1969.
Yeah.
I've seen them all from Allman and Henderson, Palmateer, Salming, Gilmore. I've seen a lot of teams come and go.
Yeah.
And this franchise it's riddled with internal defeatism. This is a franchise that has gotten to a point that in the organization itself, there's defeatism there. You know, see, the problem with the Leafs organization, and Harold Ballard, I'll use him as my prime example of what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Ballard owned the Leafs for decades.
Yeah.
No matter what type of a team he put on the ice, no matter what type of product was put on the ice, they could be in last place, and it made no difference because he knew he had a cash box in the arena.
Yeah.
Toronto fans will fill the arena no matter if they have a first-place team or a last-place team.
That's true.
And this organization, I'll bring it up to snuff and talk about today. Austin Matthews and these other young fellas that are playing today, they're great during the regular season. What's the good of them? In professional sport, if you cannot get the friggin' job done, I don't want no excuses. I don't want no maybes. I don't want the puck bounced the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
What separates champions from also-rans in all professional sport, you get the bloody job done. No excuses. You score the overtime goal. You win the big game when you have to win it. You get the goaltending when you need the good goaltending. No excuses. You get the job done. And Toronto cannot get the job done. They may win this series against Ottawa. I guarantee you. Take your last $10 bill and bet it. They will not go to the Stanley Cup final.
No, God, no. I agree with that 100%. I think they get up against Florida and Washington or one of these teams, even Washington. Yep. And I agree with you. Ottawa, look, they were up 3-0 against Ottawa.
They should have finished them in 4 games.
Finish them off. I mean, it's pretty evident, right?
But see, they have this mentality. They have this psychological, and it runs through the organization. Every time they can finish, look at the record. It's terrible. 1-33 or something. If you go online and look it up, it's terrible. They cannot. And these young fellas that are making the dollars today, and these are big stars, maybe it's time to rethink that situation. Because if they can't get the job done in the playoffs, when it counts, get rid of them.
Yeah, listen, I get rid of them, though. How do you get rid of a franchise player in the $10 million contract, right?
Yeah, well, see, this is another thing. But they're not going to get the job done, Todd. And like I said, ever since I followed the Leafs, and this is an interesting comment, the only year since 1967 that I believe the Leafs had a legitimate chance to win the Stanley Cup was in 1993. That's when they had Gilmore, Felix Potvin, and those fellows.
And, of course, they ran up against Wayne Gretzky that year, right?
Yeah, and there's controversy about that because Gretzky high-stick Gilmore, he drew blood, and the referee never called Gretzky for a penalty.
Yeah.
That went 7 games, but guess who blew it in the 7th game?
Guess who blew the Leafs?
The Leafs, yeah.
Yeah, of course. But but I think Doug Gilmore. I mean that you can't compare that team to this team. I mean, I think if the Leafs went to the 7th game of the conference final, that would almost be the equivalent to a Stanley Cup in Leafland at this point. We were so desperate for a playoff run.
I'm not a young man. I'm 63, and I'm beginning to think I'm never going to see. I was a kid when the Leafs last won the Cup. I'm beginning to seriously realize I'm never going to see Toronto win another Stanley Cup in my lifetime.
Oh, gosh, no. I'm 50, almost 56, and I'm feeling that way already.
We're not going to see it. We're not going to see it, Todd.
Yeah.
But it's entertainment. It's hockey. People get excited, and people have hope, and you have to give them that. There's always hope, I suppose. But
That's true, Kevin. Okay, thanks for the call, pal.
Take care.
All right, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Hi, Jim.
How you doing, Todd?
Well. You still in the glow, are you, Jim, or what?
No, actually, I've cooled down. I just took down my 2 signs, my 2 big signs, so I've got them ready to pick up or whatever. I'll use it for insulation.
There you go.
But listen, you had Shannon on this morning, which I thought was great, and I'll make a quick comment that I think she's more than capable of, representing Halifax quite well for a brand new politician. So I wish her well. I'm great to see that you had her on. That was a good show.
Well, I think she definitely has some moxie. I think that's the term that came to my mind when I was chatting with her. I don't know if that's. Yeah, I think she's got some moxie there for sure.
Yeah, I think she does. The other thing is I think Canadians are missing the real story. I'm not going to make any excuses for Poilievre. He had his chance, but I will say that the story really, in my opinion, Todd, is Mark Carney. He resurrected that Liberal Party from the ashes, potential ashes, 30 points ahead Poilievre was in the Conservatives, and he brought that party back, and look where he is now. He's the new Prime Minister with only 3 steps away from getting a majority, which I think he has a pretty good chance of doing if he works on it. To have that by-election, I think he should wait as long. I agree with you. I think he should wait as long as he can because
I'd wait.
Yeah, because now he's a politician.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before he was a skilled, negotiator, economics and all that kind of stuff. But now he's the politician and the prime minister. So he's got to play it out so that he can do what's best for not only the country but for his party. Conservatives are going to say that there's an overwhelming support for Poilievre, but let's look at it realistically. You got a guy that comes from nowhere, other than having some linkage to the Liberal Party. I'm talking about Carney, who was not a politician. He puts his name out there. He gets elected with no political experience whatsoever, and now he's the prime minister with a near majority. The other guy, Poilievre, was a skilled politician. Nobody will argue that. For 25-plus years and can't even win his own seat, so how could he lead the nation? So if he can't win his own seat, how is he going to get into the House and be himself again and expect, to be the prime minister someday? I think his time is done. I don't think he's ever going to see the prime minister's job, but it's only my opinion. But I think if you really look at it realistically, most leaders in the past, when they lose their own district in a major election like that, they don't last. And you'll have some people that they're not going to come out publicly and say let's give it to him. They'll do that quietly, but he's not going to be able to last. And he's the guy that had all the political experience and couldn't even win his own seat. So I think Carney's on the way to great success. He may do one term. He may go for a second term. I don't know, but that's just my take on it, Todd.
Well, I think that they're working the phones quite vigorously right now, trying to get some four-crossers, I would dare say.
Yeah, just think about it. When you're an NDP, I think the NDP are on their way out federally.
Yeah.
But I mean, just think about it. If you're an NDP and you're only 7 of you, and you have a constituency that elected you, and you don't have a party leader yourself, and you've got a new swimming pool you want, or a new recreational center in your district, or even a hospital or a school, whatever it might be, there's your chance now. So I agree with you. I suspect there's 3 there. If not, I say 3. I figure there's 2 for sure, and one, and believe it or not, Todd, one conservative that will give up their seat because they're going to be peeved off. They're going to be mad.
Yeah, that's true.
They're not going to hang around. They want something. We've seen them walk across the floor, right?
Yeah.
You've been around long enough.
Yeah. I would be shocked. I would be shocked, Jim. I would be shocked if they don't have a majority within the first couple months of.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, guy. Take care.
All right. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Albert, hello.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, the Conservatives have this perennial dilemma. The only way they can win is to become more like the Liberals. So the 2 leading prospects are Ford. I guess he'll be more like the Liberals in that he's already had his share of scandals. There was a Toronto Greenbelt scandal where he was going to duplicate the rapid population policies of the Liberal Party and have to expropriate Greens park space, land that was normally park spaces, increase urban congestion to a third world level. And he was involved in some corruption. He was going to give the green space to his developer friends because, of course, if you build an apartment in a public parkland, that's prime real estate. So he'd be a good prospect in terms of corruption. Jim Houston, well, he represents the very worst aspects of conservatism in supporting big businesses. He based his career on creating offshore tax havens for billionaires. And but he is more like a liberal in terms of violating our charter rights. When he was elected premier, promising not to impose vaccine mandates, 2 weeks after getting in, he imposed mandates. And then he made it even illegal to assemble in public to protest. He made it a felony to stand by the roads and cheer on protests. So whatever you think of vaccines, it's your choice. In my opinion, should be the individual's choice for that. So he's already imitating the Liberals. They're both imitating the Liberals in the worst ways. So who knows? Maybe that's an asset for their political fortunes. And for Poilievre, I feel sorry for losing his seat. I agree with you. It's not going to be hard for the Liberals to get a majority. If the Liberals are restricted to a minority, I think he has a chance because there was something really weird going on, running 100 candidates against him.
Yeah, that was odd. That to me, interference comes to my mind. Although if they followed the rules, but that seemed to me political interference at play.
Yeah. So, like I say, if a Liberal gets a majority, it doesn't look good for Poilievre. With a minority government, I think he can come, running back like a player on third base and stealing home. But with a majority Liberal government, that is really going to hurt his prospects, and I don't see any positive replacements for him. And I know part of it was his fault. He was still running against Trudeau for a couple of weeks after Carney took over. Right. It wasn't until the English language debate I was really impressed by him, and I started to like him. Yeah. And if he could have presented that focus throughout the entire campaign, I think he would have done much better. But he ran 2 weeks where he spoiled half the campaign running on the carbon tax Carney sound bites. Yeah. And if he could have got his message across like he did in the English language debate, he would have done much better. So who knows? You're right about everything, but
okay, Albert. Thanks for your comments, pal. Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right, take care. Mike. Hello, Mike.
Good morning, Tom. How are you this morning?
I'm well, you?
Good. First, congratulations on your recent wedding.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Quite well. Briefly, I think Poilievre has to be commended. He certainly turned around the Conservative fortunes. He found a way with Air O'Toole and or she wasn't able to do, I think to certainly find a way to gather support from the social conservative camp of those maybe in the moderate group in the party. He litigated the case against the Liberal government considerably with considerable passion. I think the area it's others touched on is the nature of in the 11th hour, and they needed to pivot in terms of his message. In retrospect, even regarding what the U.S. government was planning. If they had shown a strong united front, perhaps saying, well, look, we're going to look carefully at the idea of intergovernmental trade as a potential option, working with the premiers, that might have helped build that sense of a united front, perhaps drawing that much more support. And lastly, I think Mr. Sim probably has to do a lot of soul searching right now. I think, sadly, he burned through a lot of his political capital early, after the coalition, not necessarily standing up firmly for knowledge of what he believed in, but recognizing where the Liberal government was going in the wrong direction. And I think in hindsight in that, he's probably weighing those losses considerably right now.
Okay, Mike, thanks for your comments.
Have a great day.
All right, take care. All right, Brian, less than a minute. Go ahead. Got to be quick, but go ahead.
How you doing?
Well, you?
How's it going? Good. Yeah, listen, there's a lot for me to say. I've been wanting to get in on this show for quite a while. Basically, I'm just so glad that Poilievre is not in there. He's got so many, things against him as far as I'm concerned. And one of the big things is this notwithstanding clause thing that he wanted to introduce. And when you go down that rabbit hole, that's just not a good thing. That's not a good place to go. And I'm so shocked that a lot of people that supported him, of course they wouldn't bring it up because that would be a negative. But why would they accept that? And there's so many people calling in on the show over the last few weeks, and mostly conservative supporters, including Chris and Rick and all these guys. I got sick and tired of hearing them. It's like, my God, you guys, you got to find something else to do. The amount of desperation in their voices and the amount of times they called, it's deplorable. And then I hear all the reaction from out west, and these guys want to separate. I don't think it's a majority, but it's just ridiculous to go that direction. And if you want support, if you feel you're so hard done by out there, then join the Liberals, and then probably you'll get something done. But I mean, when you keep opposing the government that are there and keep giving them a hard time, what do you expect to get? Nothing. You keep poking the bear, and they're going to look the other way. So I mean, I think Poilievre, if he had had different tactics and, different ways of dealing with putting his message out there, I might have been okay somewhat if he had gotten in, but there were so many bad things. And he just did not look good on the world stage. You can't have somebody like him in power. You need somebody, with some accolades, some experience that can deal with things. But one last point, the thing about Carney covering his money up in foreign, places to try to save taxes. Everybody and anybody in this country that has RSPs, tax write-offs, you name it, they're all trying to do the same thing, but in a smaller scale. So why blame this guy for trying to do the same thing for his supporters and his shareholders and all this kind of thing? It's ridiculous. It's so hypocritical.
Okay, Brian, I'm out of time. Thanks for the call.
Okay,
appreciate it. All right, take care. All right, thanks for the calls, everybody. Forget pipelines. Power lines are key to Atlantic Canada's economic future. That and an op-ed in the Chronicle Herald. We'll get to it when we come back. All right, this op-ed in the Chronicle Herald, the headline, Forget Pipelines, Power Lines are key to Atlantic Canada's economic future. Arnason Mcneil, the Senior Energy Coordinator for the Ecology Action Centre, co-author of the op-ed, joins me to talk about all this. Thomas, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
All right, so pretty interesting piece, I must say. Give everybody an overview of what you were writing about here.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that, during the election, a lot of what we saw, throughout this conversation about how do we diversify our economy away from the United States, how do we create jobs, a lot of that conversation became about pipelines, and it was really dominated by the fossil fuel industry, and I think that's not an accident. This is an industry with a lot of money. It's very well organized. So they were able to kind of jump in on the conversation. And it seemed to be just a conversation about, pipelines. And ultimately, we're getting kind of a sense of deja vu. If you go back to 2018, the government of Canada already used taxpayer money to buy a pipeline. And the cost of that pipeline ballooned to $34 billion. And this is something that the former Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna, at the federal level, basically said was a mistake, that there was going to be no chance the taxpayers were ever going to recoup those costs, going to get their money back. So I think it was frustrating for a lot of us, particularly in Atlantic Canada, to just be having this same conversation only a few years later, when, a lot of the politicians involved in that had sort of admitted that it was a mistake, that it didn't make sense in terms of spending taxpayer dollars. And I think that, what we're saying both in Nova Scotia and in New Brunswick is why don't we kind of focus on what is, I think, a massive economic opportunity, connecting, parts of the grid together across Canada. Right. So when we talk about this idea of energy corridors or lowering barriers, trading barriers between provinces, I mean, this is really a conversation that is about power lines, not pipelines. And when we're talking about, the opportunity to really drive job creation, particularly in Nova Scotia, in Newfoundland, the rest of Atlantic Canada, I mean, that is a conversation that is fundamentally about are we going to have the ability to export power to, places with larger population centers where there's a big demand for electricity? So, this is a question about, I think, connecting our grid up with the rest of Atlantic Canada, certainly. Also trying to connect it to Quebec, where there's going to be just massive demand for electricity. And if we can do that, I mean, we're talking about just, tens of thousands of jobs, 25,000 jobs potentially in the offshore wind industry, and that's on the low end. So I think this is kind of a massive economic opportunity for us potentially. And I'm hoping that, people out here can kind of keep their eyes on the prize and really try and pursue, federal support for investments that are going to, create jobs in Nova Scotia because, I think there is this sort of connection in people's minds between oil and gas and job opportunities. But, it is very much the case that there are opportunities that are outside of oil and gas.
All right. What are your thoughts on Mark Carney? And he's talked a lot about this and written about it in his book, of course, Values, but he's been known to be a proponent of net zero. What are your thoughts on Mark Carney?
Yeah, I mean, I am glad that they do seem to be focusing less on this idea of building pipelines and a bit more on this idea of, not only trying to get to net zero, but again, recognizing this as just an engine in terms of job creation, a massive economic opportunity. So when you look at the Liberal Party platform and actually the New Democratic platform, both of them say, we should try and have a nation-building project where we're connecting, the grid together, having, one national grid instead of, 10 different grids in Canada that don't connect to each other, but do connect down to the United States oftentimes. So, I think we are starting to see kind of a shift in focus, and I'm hopeful that this government is going to really take this idea seriously. I think it's how we get to net zero. It's how we create a massive amount of jobs here. But, it's not good enough to just say, oh, we support the idea rhetorically. What we're talking about here is federal dollars, federal investment. And when it comes to pipelines, I mean, they're willing to write these billionaires that own the companies a check. But when it comes to provinces trying to make investments in our public infrastructure, they're always talking about a loan. So that needs to change. There needs to be federal money on the table. And hopefully we have some MPs newly elected in Nova Scotia that are really going to be willing to kind of fight for the interests of their province and their region.
All right. One of the challenges that I see would be ownership of it. And obviously you've got private companies like Emera and Nova Scotia Power. You got crown corporations like NB Power and Quebec Power. So does this create a challenge when it comes to jurisdiction and ownership and coordination?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always challenges, right? This is something that has been talked about for just decades and decades, this idea of, connecting the grid, creating a regional grid and a regional market for electricity in Atlantic Canada. And ultimately, I think that, those challenges and really a lack of federal support have sunk this idea in the past when we think about, the Atlantic Loop. But I really do think that, it's not just the ownership or the jurisdictional issues, it's the idea of federal support. Once you get the federal dollars behind a project like this, then I think the other things can kind of be hashed out. But it's the fact that they kind of want to loan the money for doing this to Nova Scotians and expect us to pay. Ultimately, I think that that's kind of the main roadblock. So if we can get over that, then I'm confident that the rest of the things can be worked out.
All right. When it comes to pipeline, Energy East Pipeline, I mean, it's still a pipe dream, for lack of a better term, because you got jurisdictional challenges. You got Quebec. You need somebody in the private sector who's going to want to buy it or want to build it, rather, and that could be 10 years out, and that's an eternity in politics, a decade. So what are your thoughts on that?
In terms of pipelines, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is a pipe dream, but it's not a project that's really been proposed anywhere. I mean, you had the Energy East pipeline that was proposed, years and years ago, and ultimately it fell through because it was not economically viable. So I think the thing for people to keep in mind here is that, this is not, like competition and really a business case that's driving this. There is no business case. It's the idea that we're going to throw more taxpayer money at this, and the taxpayers are going to pay for all the costs. And then the private oil companies are going to get, all of the revenue and all of the benefits. And I think that ultimately that is the ask here, right? And that gets lost in this whole conversation, is that they want taxpayers to kind of pay for their infrastructure. And so, I think it's something that we need to focus less on. Again, I think that they focus on it because people have this connection, especially in Nova Scotia. Oil and gas means jobs, and we really need to kind of move away from that idea and recognize that, there are people right now working in the wind industry. Certainly, I've talked to people who, used to work out in Alberta and work as, wind turbine technicians, for example, and talk about, the change in their mental health, their ability to kind of, stay close to home and work a good paying job here. So it's something that we need to start, talking about in a way that is grounded in reality. And I think that, pipelines is just not a conversation that is grounded in any way.
Thomas, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks.
All right, take care. Thomas Arnason Mcneil, Senior Energy Coordinator with the Ecology Action Centre. We'll talk politics with Don Desserud when we come back. All right, so joining us for a chat, Don Desserud, UPEI Political Science Professor. Don Desserud, thanks for doing it. We appreciate your time as always.
Well, thank you.
All right, so lots and lots to talk about, that's for sure. I guess kind of broad...
We got a half an hour, right? We can do this.
That's right. So broad strokes thoughts, I guess, on what happened on Monday night to start?
Yeah, every party is disappointed, and the disappointment is all relative, right? So the CPC was sure just 2 months ago they're going to have a landslide. They didn't. The Liberals, they're the odd one. They were down and out. Some people were even saying they might lose official party status a couple months ago, but then with Carney on board, and during the campaign, they were actually talking about a landslide themselves. Came up short. When the dust settles, of course, the NDP and the Greens must be most disappointed. But when the dust settles, the party's going to look back at this and say, okay, this was a really close race, actually a very tight race, 2 strong campaigns, but they're going to look to see what exactly they could have done differently, because I think a little bit either in one direction or another could have made a big difference in the overall results.
Well, the Liberals, it seems to me, are kind of doing the victory lap here. I don't know if I have the same interpretation, Don, to be honest with you.
Well, they are now, but 2 weeks ago they were flying really high in the polls, and then things started to sort of come back down to earth. The difference here is that they thought that they had the CPC on the ropes, and even though the Conservatives obviously didn't do what they wanted to do, when they start to look at this with some distance, they're going to be pretty pleased with the inroads that they made. On the other hand, the new support, both those parties brought in new voters and new supporters. Both those parties did well in bringing in people that wouldn't normally vote for them. But the new voters that the CPC attracted, which seemed to be, I mean, we haven't dug in really deep yet into these results, but seemed to be a combination of new Canadians and labor union type workers, and of those two groups, the socially conservative element of both those groups. Those people, I think, are going to stay with that party. I'm not so sure that the NDP voters that switched over to the Liberals or the Greens or the Bloc are going to stay with the Liberals. So they've got something to think about. If they want to maintain that support, they're going to have to sort of think about how to rein those in. On the other hand, the CPC, the Conservative Party, they've got a new group of voters in there that are responsible for them having one of their best results they've had in a very long time, even though they didn't win the election. They're going to want to stay in the direction of that party, and it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that progressive conservative flank, which is still frustrated with the fact that the party, every time it tries to move to the right, still comes short of its goal of winning an election.
All right, what about floor crossers to get to the majority of 172? What are your thoughts on how realistic or not that might be?
I think that is realistic, and I'm glad you asked me that, because the NDP, having lost official party status, I mean, they'll come back. They've been down and out before, and they've come back. But there must be members of that party who are saying, well, this is not much of a life for me in a rump caucus, and there must be people on the Liberal side who are going to be looking across and saying, we can do well by you if you come over. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some, but maybe not, more than two. One is more likely. What we're talking about here is if the Liberals are that close, what will it take for them to move over to majority territory? They don't need too many more seats. So frankly, by the way, until the recounts are in, I'm not even going to hold on to that 169. It could go either direction. Mm-hmm. But there's not very many seats for them to have to bring over to get into majority territory. And things do happen, and they can happen fairly quickly. There'll be people that won their seat and say, well, this is not what I signed up for. I didn't realize it was going to be like this, and will resign. People have all sorts of personal things happen in their personal lives, so there'll be by-elections between now and then. So, in a year or 2 years from now, you could see the Liberals in majority territory.
All right. Somebody give up their seat for Poilievre. Is that going to happen?
I guess it could. I'm betting not, and for this very reason. If you're a politician, you are ambitious. You do believe that you've got leadership abilities. That's why you're there in the first place. I guess it's not impossible that somebody would say, sure, why not? I mean, this is not the same thing as a new leader coming into a party, to rebuild it, and therefore needing a spot like Brian Mulroney, for example, back in '84. This is the case of a leader who had promised a lot and then didn't even win his own seat. And there's got to be people in that caucus. There has to be Conservatives who are thinking, I can do a better job of running this party than he did. If I had been at the helm, this wouldn't have happened. Hey, I won my seat. So I'm not sure that's going to be the formula back for Pierre Poilievre. But really, who knows what's going to go on in the minds of people who did have a very, very strong level of support for their leader.
Yeah, I think shouldn't say must be, but an ideal candidate would be somebody 55 or older in an extremely solid riding. Somebody who's already done a number of terms, already has a big pension all lined up. You could promise them something, perhaps. That might be the ideal candidate, I would think, or potential. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, that has happened before. Right? We often have had leaders who have run in by-elections. Mulroney and Chrétien both did. But again, the difference was that they were coming back, or in Chrétien's case coming back, but in Mulroney's case coming new to the party. You have to go a long ways back, back into the early part of the last century before you find the leader of a party losing his seat and then coming back in a by-election. And there's not a whole lot for an opposition party to offer somebody like that. It's not like they were in government and they could offer them a Senate seat or something.
Potentially that could be the offer, right?
For sure, and I'm sure that's what's going on right now. The question will be relative, how soon. I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if the Liberals decided not to be gracious. Often in a case like this, or I say often because that happens so rarely, in a case like this, they say, well, we want the leader of the party to be in the House, so therefore we're not going to contest it. I doubt that will happen. I'd be willing to bet because they want their majority, they'll go after it hammer and tongue. And that, by the way, is the second part of this whole problem. Yeah, a safe seat, but are there safe seats anymore? There safe seats. By-election safe seats are tricky when you know who is governing, and if the Liberals put all their efforts into defeating him in a by-election, then that's a double blow against him.
Yeah, talks about potentially Doug Ford and even Tim Houston taking or making a run for the leadership. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm really interested in what the game plan has been, if I could figure it out, for both Doug Ford and Tim Houston. Now, they both claim to represent the progressive conservative wing of the party, if you could actually call it that. I mean, in Houston's case, he makes the point, in the same way, by the way, that Dennis King used to here on the island, that he's a progressive conservative, not a conservative, and that it's a different party. In other words, he doesn't see himself as being part of a wing of that party, but as a separate party. But he's certainly been very vocal in his criticism, which means that obviously he takes that party. He has an interest in that party. That would be very interesting. Either one of them, I think would make an excellent leader of the party. But then you're still back into the whole by-election scenario of how they're going to get into the House.
And the French issue as well, not being fluent or not having much French skills at all. That's a real challenge, I would think, for both of those.
Yeah, I guess so. It was interesting that they tried to, Poilievre tried to lay that on Carney, I guess the CPC tried to lay that on Carney. Though, frankly, I think that was a bit of an over-exaggeration. I think his French was better than what his critics were saying it was. But yeah, I mean, these are the realities of Canadian politics. I would think, though, that the Conservative Party would want to entrench their support in the GTA, because that's where they made some serious inroads, or they need a really strong Western candidate, from Alberta, say, in order to rally the troops and keep their enthusiasm.
Okay, Donald Trump kind of swooned over Mark Carney yesterday, but that could change in a hurry. That could be very short-lived, right?
Yeah, this is his way. His way he deals with things. He goes all out to be all friendly, and then he turns on you, and the theory is supposed to be that you so much want his favor back that you'll compromise on things to get him back on side. I'm really hoping that Carney doesn't fall for that. I would never in a position where I would be able to advise a prime minister. So take this with a grain of salt. But I'm a little disappointed that it looks like the first meeting that he's going to have with a head of state of another country is with Trump. If I was Carney, I would be heading over to Europe and meeting with the Europeans. I'd be going to South America. I'd be going to Asia, for that matter, before I would go to the United States, just to send a message, as he says in his victory speech, that Canada has many other options. He has to show that those options are real.
Interesting, Don. Appreciate your insight. Thanks so much.
Hey, you're very welcome. Take care.
All right, take care. Don Desserud, UPEI Political Science Professor. The Halifax Wanderers having a pretty good season so far. We'll talk to Derek Martin when we come back. All right, joining us for a chat is Derek Martin, founder and president of the Halifax Wanderers. Derek, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Hey, Todd. Always good to chat. It's been a while.
It's been a while indeed, and pretty good, solid start to the season, eh? Just what the doctor ordered, right?
Yeah, I'm looking for wood to knock on because we haven't had a start like this yet, I don't think, in our 7 years. So it's nice to be at Game 5, going into Game 5 with 3 wins and a draw. It's a good feeling.
All right, what's gone right? What do you think the difference is this year?
Well, last year we just got off to a horrendous start, and it kind of took the season on a path that we couldn't recover from. We kind of started off with a bad preseason and then 2 losses on the road, and it just kind of got worse and worse and snowballed. And eventually the guys fought through it and managed to salvage a little bit towards the end, but we just could never recover. So, put a lot of effort in this off season to making a few changes that we thought we needed just to change the chemistry of the group a little bit, and sent them off to England for preseason where they did quite well and, got to play against some great competition. And then, here they are back doing pretty well to start our season. So, it's a long way to go. The playoffs aren't until the end of October, beginning of November. So we still have a lot of games to play, but it's always nice to get off to a good start for sure.
Indeed. So for those who aren't familiar with the format and the league in general, because we have new listeners all the time and new people to the region, give everybody an overview about the team and the league and the format and all the kind of background.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, always fun to talk about. We're the Canadian Premier League, so the top tier league in Canada for men's soccer. Been around now we started in 2019, so entering into our 7th season. We play 28 games. There's 8 teams across the country, so we go from coast to coast. We hosted Pacific FC, who play out of Victoria on Vancouver Island, in our first home game 2 weekends ago. So this weekend we play Saturday at 5 o'clock on TSN against the team from Hamilton, which is called Forge Football Club. It's been a great go so far. As I said, 8 teams. So we play the other 7 teams in our league 4 times, twice at home, twice away, for a 28-game season, basically every weekend through the summer and fall. And playoffs kick off around October 23rd, I think, would be the first playoff game. And the finals would be on November 10th.
And, man, would you ever love to be in the final, obviously.
Wouldn't we ever? Yeah, no, we're excited to take a crack at it, and also kind of in an exciting format. We're also in a competition as a professional club in Canada called the Canadian Championship, which means we play potentially against teams from MLS, to be Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver. And last night, Toronto and Montreal played, and Montreal beat them. And we play against Forge again on Wednesday night at their home field in Hamilton. And the winner of that game will play against Montreal in a 2-game series, which we're hoping is us. And then we get to host the MLS team here at the Wanderers grounds.
All right, so having the national coverage on TSN, or that's always fantastic. Can't go. That's marketing that you can't replicate, really, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. It's something we've been working towards for a little bit of time now, and it's certainly great for relevancy. We feel really good about, the job we've done here in Halifax, and I think we've got a good following and great support. We usually come close to selling out our stadium, just over 6,000 people every week at the games. But, when you're fighting for relevancy across the country, having a platform like TSN is a great one. Just to pick up fans in other markets, and it's always a battle, but it's been a lot of fun, and I think we're growing something pretty special here, and looking forward to the next 7 years.
All right, tell us about the venue, the Wanderers grounds.
Yeah, our favorite topic to always talk about. Listen, we're again going into the 7th year, as I've said now a couple of times, but we're still in a pop-up stadium. We pitched the pop-up way back in 2017 now. I'm dating myself. We're getting old. Yeah. But back in 2017, we had this idea to, showcase a great piece of property that is the Wanderers grounds right downtown, and, pitch the city on setting up a temporary stadium that was only meant to be there for 3 years. And then that little thing called COVID kind of came and delayed everything by a little bit. But we're still here. We've proven our point, I think, that, Halifax was ready for professional outdoor summer sports. The Wanderers grounds has proven to be a great location. A women's team has now been added into the mix that's using the venue. So, I think the argument gets stronger and stronger every year that there needs to be something more permanent at the Wanderers grounds, and we're certainly keen to play our part in that and help out in terms of funding it and becoming the lead tenant to keep it running. But we're kind of at that point with the city to kind of put up or shut up time to figure out what the situation is going to look like long term there, because we certainly can't keep playing out of a temporary stadium and using portable toilets. That time has passed.
What other options are there?
Well, I think there's two options I see. There's the option of the city building something at the Wanderers grounds like they did with the Metro Center, now the Scotiabank Center, and them running it and having us as a tenant along with whomever else wanted to be a tenant there. They could also just turn it over to us and let us build a permanent venue there, which is what we had proposed, which we could do on our dime and, make it a resource for the entire city. And failing those two options, I think we've got to unfortunately look at a different site and, find a place that we could either fund ourselves or bring in some partners. If there's a real estate development play or something along those lines that would allow us to, make the numbers all work to build a stadium. Unfortunately, these things don't make money on their own, so they're a public asset. And if it's deemed to be a good investment by the city, great. And if it isn't, then we really need to kind of move on and try to figure out what other options there are available to us.
Like being, excuse me, I think being on the peninsula is paramount, though. What are your thoughts?
Oh, for sure. It's why we pitched it originally. It goes back to conversations you and I have had for over a decade. The CFL dream has always been alive here, and they've always talked about it being in, Dartmouth or someplace off the peninsula. And, being in this business for a long time, I just disagree fundamentally with that and think that, there's a reason the Mooseheads and the Thunderbirds draw so well, and it's because they're in the heart of downtown. And what makes Halifax a vibrant, great city is an amazing district of hotels and bars and restaurants. And, we're able to take advantage of that being on the other side of Citadel Hill at the Wanderers grounds. And I think that's part of what makes, a sporting experience successful. Because it's much more than just the 2 hours that you're watching the game. It's the 2 hours beforehand you're going to have a meal with your friends, or the 2 hours afterwards that you're heading out for dinner with your wife or kids. It's a total experience. And, if we lost that, I think we'd lose a lot of what makes the experience so much fun.
Hey, you were talking about, you mentioned the women's team, and that's a great partnership, obviously, and dovetails well into your program, right?
Yeah, listen, I think the time, women's sports is experiencing a great moment right now, as well deserved. There's professional hockey in the PWHL. There's now the NSL on professional women's soccer. A lot of the professional WNBA teams coming to Toronto. It's certainly a great time if you're a women's sports fan or have a daughter who's really keen on sport. And, them coming in and using the Wanderers grounds is great. It certainly showcases the vitality of the venue and how it can, service more than just us. It's never been meant to be just us, but it took us a while before there was anybody else that could be there. But this is what it's all meant to showcase is, more people getting out and enjoying professional sport and having a great day downtown. That's what it's all about.
All right, so if people want to know more about what you got going on, your website's fantastic. Direct people to the website, All Things Wanderers, please.
All easy to find with Google and everything else now. Just search Halifax Wanderers Football Club, and all our information's there. We've got games coming up the next 2 weekends and throughout the summer. We'd love to have anybody down who's never been to a game. It's a different experience. It's a lot of fun. We've got to get you down there again too, Todd.
Indeed. Enjoyed my last visit, and I'll definitely look forward to another one very soon. Thanks, Derek.
Okay, thanks, bud. Okay,
all right, take care. Derek Martin, founder and president of the Halifax Wanderers. The House of Soleil presents the inaugural Fabric of Our DNA Award ceremony. We'll get to this when we come back. All right, some emails, some time for some emails. Pierre Poilievre was ahead by 27% and would have easily defeated Trudeau in an election. However, he only needed 5 to 7% to defeat Trudeau, but couldn't help himself, and though his own vanity kept pushing Trudeau lower, and the NDP is best friend to divide the vote. At 27%, Poilievre triggered Trudeau's downfall and ultimately his own defeat in the election. Poilievre has no knowledge of game theory. Furthermore, Pierre Poilievre got caught up in winning lots of seats, but too many backbenchers is just a nuisance with all their complaints and attention-seeking. The single goal was to win the election and form government, and he screwed up the gift from Trudeau. Comes from Roy. Let's see. Mark says this. Says, here in Nova Scotia, we will need to utilize our resources big time if Alberta says goodbye to Canada. This in reaction to the chat that I had with concerning the pipelines, and as opposed to an op-ed that was in the Chronicle Herald. And I had a chat with Thomas and Arnason Mcneil, Senior Energy Coordinator with the Ecology Action Centre. And the headline, Forget Pipelines, Power Lines are key to Atlantic Canada's economic future. And Mark sent this email in response to it. It says, here in Nova Scotia, we'll need to utilize their resources big time if Alberta says goodbye to Canada. My understanding is that about a third of our budget is reliant on funds from Alberta. This could be a major issue. On the whole Alberta separation thing, look, folks, I get it that Danielle Smith is opportunistic here, and she's capitalizing on a sentiment that is unhappy right now with the federal government, and that plays well to her brand. I get that. But how realistic is it, really, if you think about it? First of all, Alberta, if it separates, where does it go? If it's an independent nation, I don't see that working out. It's landlocked, first of all. And its resource, Alberta, oil, they would really basically only have one market, and that would be the United States, and they'd be beholden to the U.S. for price. Some would say, well, they could become a state. Well, I don't know that an orphaned province from Canada wants to become a state. I don't know that would be advantageous at all. But I get it that there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the federal government, or rather with the Alberta and what's happened federally, and they feel hard done by. And this is a story that we've heard for a very long time. Okay, just chatting with Vanessa there off air. By the way, our guest didn't materialize, hence why I'm reading emails. Well, that's okay. Anyway, I don't see it materializing, but I get that Danielle Smith, it's on brand that she's going to play hardball, and she's going to have that dialogue and that narrative. But I personally don't think that that's realistic. This from Phil says, Tim Houston cut through the BS coming from CPC supporters with this one quote: "I am left-leaning and will seriously consider voting for Houston next time." Houston went on to say he thought the federal Conservatives were very good at pushing people away, not so good at pulling people in. And that comes from Phil. Mike says this via email, he says, I got to say, it's the small things that make me think the new prime minister and his government are going to be just like the old one. I'm only going to give you one small example of what, in my opinion, is bullying by the government. I did not get my last carbon tax rebate because I did not file my income tax by April 22nd. Legally, I have until April 30th to file my income tax, which I do every year. What gives them the right to hold my carbon tax rebate? I did nothing wrong. I followed the law. That comes from Mike. Rob says this, the source of the bitterness and division in this country after a federal election is that people are unwilling to make two simple assumptions. That all of the candidates felt that they had the best idea and the best intentions for this country, and all of the voters weighed the evidence before then and voted in the best interest of Canada. If we could simply assume this, we would be much more supportive of the right of each of us to make up our own minds. And even if we're disappointed with the result, we'd be happy knowing that we live in a country where everyone gets a vote and where the people themselves choose their government. And let's see, time for one more. Yes, say they didn't form government. This from Dave on Poilievre, and the CPC says they didn't form government, but they did great numbers wise. Rather, they secured more seats and the highest vote numbers in years. This is all because of Paul Evans' message. He rallied the support. He lost his seat because of a district border change and an attack from the longest ballot committee. And I referenced the longest ballot committee earlier in the show. And I agree that was a form of political interference, in my humble opinion. By the way, folks, if you want to send me emails, I love to get them. I read them all. I don't get a chance to respond to all of them because I get a lot of emails. I try and get back to as many of you as I can. But I certainly read them all. Todd.Veinotte@rci.rogers.com. That's the way to reach out to me via email again. Todd.Veinotte@rci.rogers.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. On the Leafs tonight, I think the Leafs will probably lose. Hate to say it, but I think the Leafs lose tonight. And then you want to talk about full-blown panic mode in Game 7. But I hope I'm wrong. But I just don't have a good feeling about tonight in Ottawa. We shall see. Thanks to Vanessa Vandeness as well on the other side of the glass at the control boards, doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.